Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's the third year actually I've attended the IMC conference, and I've got to say it's got better and better every year. And I think as a company that's a big supporter of the IAB and someone who works across markets that doesn't have an IAB, I definitely see a big difference from a market that does versus a market that doesn't, which is one of the reasons why I think it's key that as an industry we come together to solve some of the challenges that we all face. And ad format sizes is still an issue that plagues me to this day in many markets, so please expand more. So what I wanted to talk about today was personalization. The theme of the conference is around big data. And what does big data mean? Well, it means giving a personal experience to a user, either with a product or with an ad campaign. Okay? If we actually look at this digital world that we live in today, life has changed hugely in probably the last 5 years. We look at the number of emails that are sent a day. We look at, in the last 12 months, more photos were taken than the entire history before the last 12 months. The amount of money that people are spending online today is getting bigger and bigger. That 272,000 is actually a US figure. But again, e-commerce is getting bigger and bigger. And as I was lying in bed today, I was thinking about how my life has changed with the advent of the smartphone. So I wanted to take you through a quick thing of what I did first thing this morning. It's G-rated, okay? So I woke up with this. And from this, I took a picture because it was a beautiful sunrise this morning. I had to tell people about it. I tweeted it. I thought it would be a good time to see if my wife posted any new photos overnight of our baby. She hadn't. It's disappointing. I did some emails. I thought it was important to get some work done relatively easily. I checked the weather, important, because I plan to be by the pool hopefully late this afternoon and tomorrow. It looks good. I missed my daughter, so I thought I would check out some old pictures that I had taken. Now, this is slightly embarrassing. You're probably thinking, why was I looking at this? Well, the person in the room next to me was listening to a song that I thought was actually quite good. So I Shazammed it and found out it was Miley Cyrus. Which is slightly embarrassing. But, it's something I did. And a friend of mine got married. I'm from Australia. She got married on the weekend. I couldn't be there, but again, I could see her wedding photos instantaneously. And I did this all within almost 15 minutes. Okay. Oh yeah, I checked the news as well. There's 4 people lost their home. Terrible. But as I said, we can do all these types of stuff without getting out of bed very, very quickly. And within a space of 15 minutes, I knew what was going on with my friends, my home, my work, and the weather, which is important. So it's really, if you compare that to 5 years ago, or for those who are old enough to remember life pre-smartphone, how long would it have taken for me to do that? So it is quite amazing. And if we look at these top 12 online habits over here, you can see that there are many, many things you can do now in this place we call digital that we couldn't do today, from communicating. A lot of studies show that we almost socialize more on social networks than we do with people, which is probably kind of sad, but it's the reality of what life's going on. But for things like listening to music, writing blogs, playing games, shopping, weather, socializing, emailing, asking questions, joining communities, all these types of things now are the top habits that people are doing online. Now, if we look back at the original days of what I like to call Web 1.0, we very much started with something like this. It was almost, the internet was a container for information that was offline, that was simply picked up and dropped into the thing we call the internet at the first stage. It was very much around aggregating information, okay? But as the web got bigger and bigger, and there became millions of websites, it became much more difficult to navigate this very complex area. And that's when the product search came along. It allowed us to navigate through this vast information and find that piece of information that was relevant to us. And then social media came along, and it took that almost to the next step. Search allowed us to find information that was important to us. social media then gave us information that was important to our friends. Okay? And this is what we've seen happen up until now. But I definitely see this Web 3.0 come along. It's driven by many, many different things, from, as Randa was talking and alluding to, different devices at different times of the day, different screen sizes. And I think it's important that when I talk about digital, it's across all mediums, because it depends what time of the day. There's probably only one time in the day when you're probably in the shower where you're not exposed to the digital world. Maybe some people do have waterproof casing or something. But really what we see is this landscape, this product of evolution, where that if you're not thinking about your product, thinking about the design of your product across multiple devices, you're going to miss huge chunks of the day where you can connect with your users. And importantly for advertisers, if you're not thinking about this cross-platform experience and what our users are doing during the day, again, you're missing connecting with the users no matter where they are at any time of the day. You only have to look at, and this audience is actually pretty good, but a lot of times I attend conferences and I think more people are looking down than looking up. I think it's something that you can't take offense to, but the reality is we are all becoming multitaskers. Women would say they've been doing that for a long time. I would argue that we've been doing it as well. We just don't brag about it. But this is what's happening today. Now, I think that also adds some challenges for marketeers. In this very noisy world where there's a lot of information at our fingertips, how can we connect with users? And how can we, as marketeers, give them that message that we want? And I believe it's very much around personalization. So, what do I mean by personalization? Well, this slide is both relevant from a product point of view, but also from an advertising point of view. We can see the circle at the top left is around the content or the product. Then we've got the data piece. And then we've got ad effectiveness. And what data allows you to do for an individual is find this purple patch. And pardon the pun, that's not purple patch because of Yahoo, but it's an expression. But it allows you to find that purple patch where you are giving a personal product experience, leveraging the insights that you know about your user, and then giving advertisers the ability to join into that area and provide a relevant piece of relevant product or a relevant piece of information with a relevant ad to the users. And until you actually think about it in that way, where you are combining these three elements, you will definitely fail from a monetization point of view, and you'll also fail from a product point of view, because there's a lot of competition and people are very smart. Now, this big data concept is something that we've been talking about for a while. I know I've been talking about data and targeting for many, many years. And I think it's important that we ask some really hard questions about what that actually means. Now, the best type of data is information that you have about what your users are interested in. It's what type of content they read. It's the type of ads they click on. It's the type of search terms they look for. It's also some of the social signals from Facebook and Twitter that they express. Bringing this information together and then deciphering it and putting it into easily digestible clumps of information is the way that make a targeting campaign work. But I also think it's important that we look at how different players are actually doing this. And these are the questions that I would ask everyone to ask the data or the targeting provider. For example, is the information declared or is it assumed? And what I mean by that is, for example, on Yahoo Mail, when you sign up, you're declaring you're a female or a male. That's declared. There's no reason for someone to lie about it because it's hidden information. No one ever sees it. Or are you assuming because someone goes to a finance channel that they're men? Now, a lot of people do that, and I think a lot of women here say it's completely wrong, and it is. You may be 50% accurate, but 50% accurate on targeting is 50% wrong. And these are the types of questions that we need to ask. The other thing that's important is scale. And what do I mean by that? Well, scale is, if you've only got 3 people or 100 people or 1,000 people or 100,000 people coming to your website, it's very hard, you can make assumptions. When you have millions, it gets much easier. But many competitors and many players will use surveys, and then based on that survey, scale it out. Now, the problem with surveys is often it can be only targeting certain people, and it doesn't always get the right information. And when you scale that up, you scale up the inaccuracy as well. And so I think it's important for marketeers that you ask these types of questions to your targeting providers to make sure that you actually understand where that data is coming from, what assumptions are being made, what's declared, what's explicit, or what are they implying based on that information. It's very, very important. Now, the other important thing is when you have all this data, what do you actually do with it? Is there some guy sitting there doing big pivot tables? Okay, and this is important as well. If you don't actually have the technology to actually take that data and put it into, as I said before, easily digestible pieces of information, then it's going to be very hard for you actually to leverage it. So technology is fundamental in the ability to decipher that data and then bundle it up so advertisers can target the users and the audience that they want. And again, this is very, very important as well. Now, I think everybody's aware of, the old school purchase funnel. Now, in my view, this funnel is still relevant today. There are many, many things, however, within this funnel that have changed and will continue to change. If we look at branding and awareness, I think as Randall alluded to earlier, it's still a fundamentally important thing that marketeers need to keep front of mind. And for example, I thought I would plug the Rising Star billboard format, which does two great things. And we often hear this from our agency partners, that the creative costs and the creative burden with these types of rich media formats historically has been very, very tiresome for an agency. And I've specifically seen it in many of the markets I work in, where the average order size is relatively small, and you're putting almost anywhere between 20 and 50% of the cost of the campaign on creatives. It's crazy, and this is why I definitely applaud the IAB working on making these rich media formats much easier and much cheaper to execute. And the billboard's a great example of that. In terms of consideration, video is incredibly important, and I think video comes in two parts. It's obviously original programming, but it's also around formats that actually leverage a video technology. A lot of brands today are investing heavily in creating their own content. Brands like Red Bull, I always use that as an example because they're probably the best company at doing it. They create content that's very relevant to their brand. And so they need big formats and a great exposure of this content, and users love it. Now, the area where I see a lot of change coming is on the conversion side of things. And one of the products that's becoming very, very important and is quickly spreading is around native ads. Now, I think there are many different examples and many different definitions of a native ad, and I'll try and give you mine. And you can maybe criticize me later. But what I see in a native ad is a relevant ad in a relevant environment. Okay, and it can take the form of different things. But I want to talk you through a product that Yahoo's recently launched called Stream Ads. Okay, it's very much taking and expanding upon the types of ads that you see within news feeds of either Twitter or Facebook. I think the fundamental difference, though, is that these ads are being placed into relevant contextual environments. Okay? It's almost the next step of contextual advertising, which for years has been a very successful way of targeting your users. But the difference of this is actually combining these three different areas to actually give even more relevance. Okay? It's understanding what the user likes to consume from a content. Are they more interested in finance and sport type content? What has the history of content absorption been? Okay? It's then leveraging that data to find out exactly what is relevant to that user, and then it's giving the advertiser the ability to put their contextually relevant ad within that environment. So you are giving this fantastically unique user experience from both a product point of view. You're giving them the relevant information, the relevant content that they like to consume, and you're giving them relevancy from an ad. And that's where the big difference between where I see native ads have been from and where native ads now are moving into. So this is an example of how it works. And what we've seen is a huge increase in a couple of the key metrics. Now, I think as Rand alluded to, there are many, many metrics, and some are good and some are bad. But what we've actually seen from a product point of view is we've actually seen an increase in the number of page views and the number of times our users come back to our homepage. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is we're giving them much more relevant content. Okay? Each front page or each vertical has specific content for that specific user, and that's important. And from an advertising point of view, is paying off dividends with a significant increase in the click-through average of this particular format versus our standard IAB banner ads. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. I alluded to the fact that yes, it's a better targeting, or it's a very good targeting situation in a relevant targeting environment. But there's also something else that adding to it, and I'll just quickly go on to it. The chart on the left is actually a study that we did to actually look at where the eyeballs are on a page. And you can see on this particular example, we've got the heavy eyeballs on the video, which is something that we definitely expected. And then we've got a very, very heavy eyeball into the content feed. Okay, and that's where a lot of the native ads are now positioning themselves. And so we've actually seen a huge amount of recall, particularly brand recall, as almost as equal to the actual content recall. And you can see a study that was done on the right by Sharethrough and IPG. The actual native brand recall and the content recall were almost the same. Now, doing these types of stream ads works if you stick to the fundamentals and stick to the principles of maintaining relevant ads in relevant contextual environments. Where it goes wrong, and where I've been quite critical of some of the native ad formats that I've seen, is there can be a tendency to loosen the relevance, loosen the targeting relevance, where you get a situation where you get a lot of news feeds with a lot of ads that are no longer contextually relevant to you. And I think that damages the product, and it also damages the performance of the campaign. That's why it's fundamental that you stick to the principles, because it not only benefits the advertising, which is fundamentally important to revenue of a company, but if you don't respect that, the users will go away. And this is why we've seen actually a fundamental increase in page views by keeping this relevancy very, very strict. Now, the other thing that's important, what I talked about before, is we are accessing the digital world through multiple screens. And so it's fundamental that what you do, what you like to consume on your PC, is also spread through the different devices that you have, so that you can continuously provide relevant content and continuously provide relevant advertising. And this is what we're seeing with many native ad pushes, but this is an example that you can run your campaign across multiple devices. Now, I think one of the challenges of this industry is that we do move pretty quickly. And on the one hand, you know, if you were here last year or you were here at the conference mid-year, we talked about programmatic the entire time. We're very good as an industry of coming up with the next big thing. But I think it's important for marketers that we have to remember that some things stay the same. And I'm convinced that the fundamentals of a successful advertising campaign never change. And these are four key things that I think we always need to keep in mind, no matter what format or no matter what type of ad creative or publisher that you advertise on, or social network that you advertise on. These are the four core important things. Targeting. You need to get the right ad in front of the right person at the right time. And there are many different ways of doing that now, as I talked to you before. Content and context is becoming more important. We've historically always done, if you want to have a finance ad, you put it in finance channel. That's always been a relatively simple, yet very effective. But now we're looking at that next step, and that's where the the stream ads or the native ads within a contextual environment. It's taking that contextual idea to the next stage. Format and placement has become very, very important, and I think some of the stuff that IB is doing around the Rising Stars is again taking it to the next step. What can we do to make and allow brands to have big awareness, but we don't disturb the user with huge, massive formats, but importantly, we make it easier and cheaper for advertising agencies to do it. And then in the creative, I think historically, because of the ad format sizes within digital, not the same amount of information or the same amount of time was spent building a digital creative for 300 by 250 as a big outdoor billboard. And I think what we're seeing now is that's a big seismic shift. People are putting the same amount of time now, maybe not as much in some markets, but people are now thinking about, hey, what can we do in a digital world that we would love to? We only wish we could do it on a newspaper. And we're seeing some great formats coming up, particularly on tablets, where the magazine ad now comes alive in a way that magazines would only love to do. So these are things that I think is important we all should keep in mind, no matter what technology is doing. So what's coming to 2014 in Greece for Yahoo? Well, there's a couple of things. This year has been pretty eventful with the launch of the weather app, new mail and new political apps in Greece. But what we're doing next year is we will be launching a new Yahoo homepage, which we're all very, very excited about, which will bring together what I was talking to earlier around the stream ads. So this is something that we're very excited about. And if we actually look at, this is actually the yahoo.com, so this is the US site, you can see that we have a bigger picture area, and behind that is very much a personalization engine, which will give, if you go to the front page or your friend goes to the front page, it'll be different content based on what you like to read. And we'll be obviously much more on implications, and then bringing in streaming ad capabilities as well, which is something that we're really looking forward to. So, thanks for having me.